Last spring, a guy down the street spent over $300 on pre-emergent and still had crabgrass coming up through his driveway cracks by June. I walked over with a $2 bag of powder from the feed store and told him to put it down instead. He laughed at me. Here's the thing. By the end of summer, his lawn was the cleanest it had been in years, and he never touched a chemical. This stuff was studied at a major university, patented as a natural weed preventer, and then it quietly vanished from the shelves the big lawn companies stock. Stay with me, because there's one exact window to put it down. Miss it by 10 days, and it does absolutely nothing. Let me be straight with you about who sidelined this. It wasn't a shadowy cabal. It was the commercial lawn treatment industry and the companies that make synthetic pre-emergents. They didn't ban this powder. They just had no reason to sell it, and every reason to point you somewhere else. Here's the anchor you can go check yourself. Back in the late 1980s, a researcher named Dr. Nick Christians at Iowa State University was running turf disease trials. He noticed something he wasn't even looking for. In the plots where cornmeal had been worked into the soil, weed seedlings simply weren't coming up. No crabgrass, no clean rows of new sprouts. He chased that down, and in 1991 he was granted a U.S. patent for the stuff as a natural weed preventer. That's a real patent, real university, real name. Now think about what that means for the homeowner. Most folks I talk to are spending $200, $300 a season on bagged synthetic pre-emergent and lawn service applications every spring, year after year, pulling weeds on the weekends in between. And the whole time, there was a product studied at a major university that does a big chunk of that same job for about $2. I want to be honest with you. I didn't take it on faith. I've been doing lawns down here for 30 years, and I've seen plenty of miracle products that turned out to be garbage. So I tested this one myself. I ran it on a customer's lawn for 3 straight seasons, tracking the timing, watching the crabgrass come back or not come back. What I found changed how I think about pre-emergence completely. It works, but only if you understand what it actually is and exactly when to put it down. Get that wrong, and you wasted your money. Get it right, and your neighbor's going to wonder what you're doing different. So let me tell you exactly what it is. It's corn gluten meal. That's it. Corn gluten meal. It's a byproduct of wet milling corn, the same process that pulls starch and corn syrup out of the kernel. What's left over is this gritty golden powder, and for about 100 years the only thing anybody did with it was feed it to livestock. Cattle, chickens, hogs, even dog food. It's high in protein, so the feed industry loves it. You can walk into any feed store or farm supply shop down here and buy a 50-pound bag for next to nothing. Around $2 a pound, often less if you buy it in bulk. That's the whole secret. A bag of animal feed. And here's the part that gets me every time. It's sitting right there. It's not hidden in some vault. It's hidden in plain sight, in the wrong aisle. You won't find it stacked next to the bagged fertilizer and the weed and feed at the big box store. You'll find it in the feed section, with the chicken scratch and the cattle supplement, labeled as nutrition for animals. Nobody connects the bag of livestock feed to the crabgrass in their driveway. That's exactly why it slipped through the cracks. The people buying it weren't thinking about lawns, and the people fighting weeds were never told to look in the feed aisle. Now remember that patent I mentioned. The one Dr. Nick Christians filed at Iowa State back in 1991. This is the product. Corn gluten meal is what he stumbled onto during those turf disease trials. He wasn't even looking for a weed preventer. He was studying a fungus, using cornmeal in the test plots, and he noticed the plots with cornmeal in them weren't growing weeds. The seeds just weren't taking. A lot of people would have written that off as noise. He didn't. He chased it down, ran it out, and figured out that the corn gluten fraction was doing the work. He patented it as a natural pre-emergent, a bag of feed store powder, patented at a major land-grant university. And then it quietly never made it onto the shelves where the lawn products live. Trust me on this one. That's not an accident. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because once you understand how it works, you understand why the big lawn companies couldn't make it fit their model. Corn gluten meal stops weeds with chemistry. But it's chemistry that comes out of a corn kernel, not a factory. When that powder breaks down in your soil, it releases a group of compounds, dipeptides, 2 amino acids hooked together. And these dipeptides do one very specific thing. They shut down root formation in a seed that's just starting to germinate. Let me walk through that, because the detail is everything. A weed seed sitting in your soil sprouts in 2 directions. It pushes a little shoot up looking for light, and it pushes a root down looking for water. That's how every plant survives those first few days. The root grabs hold and starts drinking. Corn gluten meal hits that root. The dipeptides stop the new root from developing. So the seed pops its little sprout, but there's no root system underneath it. No anchor, no water uptake. And the second the soil dries out even a little, that rootless sprout has nothing to fall back on. It withers and dies right there. It never had a chance to become a plant. That's the mechanism. And it tells you something critical about how you have to use this stuff. Corn gluten meal is a pre-emergent. Only a pre-emergent. It works on the seed in that vulnerable germinating moment, and nowhere else. It does absolutely nothing to a weed that's already up and growing. If you've got mature crabgrass spread across your lawn, established with a real root system, you can dump corn gluten on it all day long, and it'll laugh at you. It does not kill living plants. Let me say that plainly so nobody wastes a bag. This is not a spray you reach for in July when the weeds are already winning. It's a barrier you put down before the seeds ever wake up. Pre-emergent, not post-emergent. Get that straight in your head and you're already ahead of most of the people who try this and quit. But here's the second half of the mechanism, and this is the part that turns a decent weed preventer into something genuinely powerful. That corn gluten powder is roughly 10% nitrogen by weight. 10%. Nitrogen is the number one thing your grass eats. It's the N in the NPK ratio on every fertilizer bag you've ever picked up. So while those dipeptides are down there, starving out the weed seeds, the rest of the powder is breaking down into a slow, steady feed for the grass you actually want. Think about what that does. You're not just blocking the enemy. You're feeding your own troops at the same time. Your existing turf gets a shot of nitrogen, and it responds the way grass always responds to nitrogen. It thickens. It fills in. The blades crowd closer together and the canopy gets denser. And a dense lawn is the best weed control there is, because weed seeds need light and bare space to establish. A thick lawn is a fortress. When the turf is packed tight, a germinating weed seed down at the soil line can't get the sunlight it needs. And even if it tries to sprout, the corn gluten is right there waiting to cut its root off. You've got 2 defenses working together off one application. The chemistry above, the density from the feeding. That's the 1-2 punch. So think about why that's a problem for the people selling you lawn programs. A synthetic pre-emergent stops the seed and does nothing else. You still have to buy a separate fertilizer to feed the lawn. 2 products, 2 trips, 2 applications on the calendar. Corn gluten does both jobs out of 1 cheap bag of feed. 1 product. 1 pass. And that's exactly the kind of efficiency that doesn't show up in the standard lawn treatment playbook. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where it gets real. The application rate you want is right around 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Write that down. 20 pounds. That's a lot more product than a synthetic. And we'll get to why that matters later. But for now, just know that's the rate Dr. Christian's research landed on. And it's the rate I've used on my own Bermuda for years. For a typical front yard like mine, that's roughly 35 to 40 pounds of corn gluten in 1 pass. A couple of bags from the feed store. Here's the math on what that buys you. The first year you put it down, timed right, you're looking at around 60% crabgrass reduction. Not perfect. 60%. And I'll be honest with you, the first year, 60% doesn't sound like a miracle. But here's the thing nobody tells you. It compounds. Every weed seed you stop from rooting this spring is a seed that never matures, never flowers, and never drops its own 150,000 seeds into your soil come late summer. So next year, the seed bank in your soil is already smaller. You're starting from a better position. Year 2, that 60 climbs. Year 3, Christian's documented control up to about 86% in his trials. 86. From a bag of livestock feed. That's the part the lawn industry never advertises. A product that gets stronger the longer you use it, instead of one you have to keep rebuying at the same strength forever. A synthetic pre-emergent does the same thing every spring. Same bottle, same result, same bill. Corn gluten quietly drains the seed bank year after year until the problem mostly takes care of itself. And that's exactly the kind of thing that doesn't make it into the standard lawn treatment playbook. Now here's where it gets interesting. The part even folks who've heard of corn gluten get wrong. It's not just crabgrass. Those dipeptides cut the root off any small-seeded weed that's trying to germinate at the same time. Crabgrass, foxtail, dandelion, clover, redroot pigweed. If it's coming up from seed in that window, corn gluten works on it. But, and this is the line people skip right past, it does absolutely nothing to a weed that's already up and rooted. Nothing. A mature dandelion with a taproot the length of your finger? Corn gluten will feed it, not kill it. This is a pre-emergent. It stops the next generation. It does not clean up the current one. There's one more piece, and it's the piece that trips up almost everybody who tries this and gives up. You have to water it in. About a 1/4 inch of water, just enough to release the dipeptides into the top layer of soil where the seeds are waking up. But, and trust me on this one, after you wet it, you need a dry spell. A day or two of no rain, because the drying is what actually finishes the job. When that little weed sprout pops up rootless and the soil dries out, the sprout has no root to pull moisture, and it dries up and dies. If it stays wet, that sprout can sometimes push out a fresh root and recover. The drying is the kill. Get the water then dry sequence backwards, and you've wasted the whole bag. That's the thing my neighbor down the street couldn't believe. He dumped $300 in synthetic pre-emergent into that lawn, and still had crabgrass in his driveway cracks. I handed him a $2 bag, told him to time it, water it, let it dry. And by the end of that summer, his lawn was the cleanest it had been in years. He never touched a chemical. He just stopped fighting the weeds the expensive way and started starving them the cheap way. And that's the kind of result that doesn't sell a single bottle of branded product. Now, before we keep going, I want to tell you about something. If what I'm showing you today is clicking, and you're starting to realize that everything you were told about weeds was backwards, then you're ready for the full system. Corn gluten is one tool. The reason it works is the weed cycle itself. The seed bank sitting in your soil and the exact triggers that wake those seeds up. That's Chapter 2 of my book, Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. It's called The Weed Cycle, Understanding Your Enemy, and it lays out the biology that makes timing everything. If you're exhausted by pulling weeds every single weekend, and you want a permanent fix instead of another one-off tip, that's the chapter that changes how you see your whole yard. The book's $17 at larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point the camera at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here. If you're on your phone or laptop, the link's right below this video. All right, let's talk about why this vanished. Because this is the part that matters. The synthetic pre-emergents the lawn companies stock, protiamine, pendimethalin, those are the big two, Our proprietary chemistry. Somebody owns the formula. They're high margin, and here's the kicker. You only need a few ounces per 1,000 square feet. A little bag covers a big lawn, and the markup on those few ounces is enormous. Now put corn gluten next to that. 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet. It's bulky. It's heavy. It's a commodity any feed mill in the country produces by the ton as a leftover from making cornstarch and syrup. Nobody can brand it. Nobody can patent a fresh version of it. There's no margin to defend. And here's the part that really tells you the story. That product also removes a billable application from the calendar. A lawn treatment company makes its money on recurring visits. Spring pre-emergent, then a separate fertilizer trip, then a follow-up. Corn gluten does the pre-emergent and the feeding in one pass, and it's something you can buy and spread yourself for a couple bucks. That's not one lost sale. That's a recurring line item gone from the service contract every single year. The patent. Dr. Christian's patent on corn gluten as a weed preventer lapsed somewhere around 2009 to 2011. So for over a decade now, anybody could put this on a shelf, in a pretty bag, right next to the proteamine. And they still don't. Not because it doesn't work, because there's no money in selling a cheap commodity that competes with your high-margin product and cancels your follow-up visit. The shelf space goes to whatever pays for the shelf. Now I want to be straight with you because you're smart and you'd catch me if I wasn't. Corn gluten is not a perfect replacement for synthetics. It's less reliable. A synthetic gives you 90+% control the first year, every year, like clockwork. Corn gluten demands precise timing. Miss the window and you get nothing. And it takes about 3 years of consistent use to hit its peak. So if you want instant, guaranteed, hands-off results and you don't mind the chemistry or the bill, the synthetics do work. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But that's a fair trade you should get to choose. The problem is nobody offered you the choice. They just quietly left the cheap option off the shelf and let you assume the $300 program was the only way. And here's the personal cost of that. Years of weekend pulling, hundreds of dollars a season. Fighting a problem a $2 bag of feed could have been shrinking for you the whole time. So let me give you the one thing that makes or breaks this, the window I teased at the start. Stay with me, because this is the difference between a clean lawn and a wasted bag. Corn gluten has to go down at one exact moment in spring. You want the soil temperature, measured at 1 to 2 inches deep, sitting right around 50 to 52 degrees, and rising, before it crosses 55. 55 degrees is the magic number where crabgrass seed wakes up and germinates. You have to have the corn gluten already in place and activated before that happens. That's the whole game. How do you know? 2 ways. The field signal is forsythia. When those bright yellow forsythia shrubs start blooming in your area, your soil is right in that window. Down here in DFW, that's usually early March. But don't guess. Confirm it. Spend the $10 on a soil thermometer, push it in a couple inches in the morning, and watch for that 50 to 52 reading climbing toward 55. That probe takes the guesswork out completely. Then the activation, the way we talked about, a 1/4 inch of water to release it, then a dry day or 2 to finish the kill. Get all of that lined up and you'll see what my neighbor saw. Now here's the kicker, the part that closes the loop. Miss that window by just 10 days and it doesn't simply do nothing. It backfires. Because if you're 10 days late, those crabgrass seeds have already germinated and rooted. They're established plants now. And corn gluten can't touch an established plant. Worse, remember it's 10% nitrogen by weight. So when you spread it on top of crabgrass that's already up, you're not stopping it. You're fertilizing it. You're feeding the exact enemy you were trying to kill. That's why timing isn't a suggestion with this stuff. It's the entire battle. Precision kills weeds. Guessing feeds them. And with corn gluten, guessing literally feeds them. Before I let you go, now you've got the knowledge the lawn company's quietly sidelined. And corn gluten is really just one piece of a bigger idea. That idea is the whole reason I wrote my book, Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. Chapter 1 is called Why Everything You Know About Weeds is Wrong, and it reframes the entire problem. Weeds aren't a chemical warfare problem. They're a prevention problem. It's the system I wish someone had handed me 20 years ago instead of a bottle of Roundup. If you're exhausted by pulling weeds every weekend and you want a permanent fix, not another tip. It's 88 pages. No fluff, just the plan, for $17 at larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on the TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. No rush, I'll be right here. Phone or laptop, just type in larrysgardenbooks.com. All right, here's the takeaway. A $2 bag of corn gluten meal, patented at Iowa State by Dr. Nick Christians, will prevent crabgrass without a single chemical, as long as you time it to soil temperature and not the calendar. Get that one window right and you break the synthetic pre-emergent cycle. The big lawn companies built their whole billing calendar around. You don't owe them $300 a season anymore. Next time I'm going to show you another one they'd rather keep quiet. A molasses and microbes soil drench that brings dead, compacted clay back to life and gets water moving through it again. It's cheap, it works, and almost nobody's talking about it. Go put your soil thermometer in the ground this week and watch for that 50-degree mark. Go check your lawn. You'll see what I mean. I'll see you in the next one.